Hi, it's George Nordhaus, and welcome to Monday morning. We're going to talk about something that everybody needs to know, or at least the bigger agencies, particularly agencies who work with your customers or your clients and so forth in human resources. I have been working with Don Phin for a number of years. I don't know how long, but he was in Los Angeles, or in Southern California with me, and for a long, long time. And we'd worked, and I've been to his seminars and all that. He had something called HR That Works, but now he's vice president of ThinkHR. And you probably wonder, what the heck is this HR all about? Well, let me tell you about Don's background. You can see this right here, just a second. All right, let's see your picture, Don. Good. He's been a lawyer for a long time, and he was, what is EPLI, Don?
EPLI, it's Hermes Employment Practices Journal.
Oh, how about that?
I've been the editor of that for 13 years now.
No kidding. Well, I know that you speak a lot, because you came over here to Santa Fe to speak even. I heard you there. But, I mean, I've had you on numerous times, and it's always worked because, you know, you were really the only lawyer who was kind of in the insurance agencies on that level from HR that we could find in the country, and so it really did work. Now, are we going to be talking today about the agents auditing themselves, or agents working for their clients? Or what are you talking about now with the audit?
Good question, George. The primary focus, and as George and I spoke about in the head, this is not going to take a really long time. The primary focus is how brokers are using the concept of auditing to both attract business and to then help the business once they have it. So that's what we're going to talk about. And as I say, by the way, your own HR practices matter too. So you ought to be checking your own HR practices, you know, and have the integrity of eating your own dog food, as they say.
All right. Well, let's talk about it. I'm going to learn with you. So go.
All right. So we begin by asking a very simple question: why do companies need to audit themselves at all? And those of us in risk management know that, you know, compliance is enormous today. At many of the companies that we work with, the HR people are an overwhelm. Just because they're given an HR hat, they're expected to know more than 150 laws. When I speak to the CEOs all around the country, I say it's really unfair what you do to HR people. The second you give them the title, you expect them to know all of this, and I show them a list of 150 different things. And I say that's kind of unfair, and so what they really need is some help. And I've been able to audit a lot of HR practices at many companies because just like when you speak to the CEOs, when I speak to the CEOs, this is a real need they have. The challenge is the CEOs don't know how to manage HR because they've got no background that would allow them to do so. They've got a background to manage operations, finance, sales, those things. They really don't have a background to manage HR, so guess what? They don't. And it might be somebody in an administrative, accounting, or CFO position that they say, hey, you're HR. So, for example, I'm going to be doing a webinar in 2 weeks for about 600 CFOs of construction firms.
Wow.
And many of those have HR functions. Don't expect them to be HR experts. You know what they know how to do? New hire reporting and benefits enrollment. So many HR people know how to do the data of HR. They don't know how to do anything strategic or anything compliance-wise around HR, and that's where they need a lot of help. Okay. So the why is that they need the help. Secondly, the exposure can be enormous. One thing in my position in EPLI, I've been in the catbird seat about all the statistics around claims, and I speak with people like Rob Betterly, and we talk about this. And the reality is the average verdict across the United States over the last 10 years has been around $250,000. That doesn't include the lawyers, doesn't include the time, the emotion, all those types of things. And we'll talk about the fact that these people should have employment practices coverage. But the exposure is enormous. And I did a CEO workshop 2 days ago in Orange County. Two of the guys there, one just got hit with a wage and hour claim, class action claim, and when he told me the facts, I said, listen, I don't know how you got caught in that trap. You should have realized that these people should have been paid overtime. He goes, well, my HR person didn't know and nobody told me. You know? So now he finds himself on the back end of a suit where they're going back for 4 years worth of overtime. And when you include the penalties and everything, it could be the equivalent of the salaries paid those people over the last 4 years, which is crazy.
Oh, my God.
No, yeah, right, exactly. And not only that, you can't even get EPLI coverage to cover the indemnity. You can get the defense on a wage and hour claim, but not the indemnity on it. So just one simple claim like that is enormous.
For sure,
all right?
Could kill you.
And the reality of a lot of these companies is they don't know what they don't know. All right. So that's. Secondly, the courts. If you ever get trapped in any of these claims, one of the things the courts and of course the plaintiffs' counsel are going to dig into: what efforts have you made on the front end to avoid any of this? You know, have you made sure everybody got sexual harassment training? Have you audited your wage and hour practices? All those types of things will help mitigate any exposure at that point, especially to punitive damages. So if you have I've seen statements in cases where you've got the CEO saying, I don't care about this HR stuff. When that comes to light in trial, that's just feast for the plaintiff's attorneys. And they really want to go after the punitive damages, and that's how you get it.
Oh, they
so
love it, yeah.
The number of laws is incredible. The exposure is incredible. And the reality about the EPL practice is it's not a frequency claim. You're not going to get sued with wage and hour class action every day. But it's a severity claim. And so when we talk in terms of risk management of frequency and severity, EPLI claims are pretty much severity claims. So that's pretty good enough reason why to audit.
I'm convinced.
And it goes back, another thing it goes back to is showing a commitment to the management team. So there's a message that's sent down when you take things seriously. It's that you take things seriously. The message when you don't do all these things is just the opposite. Hey, these guys really don't care about this. I can get away with things. And you'd be surprised how many managers, in order to make their division bottom line look good, will try to get people to work extra hours without paying them overtime. Will try to treat somebody as an independent contractor. Will think they can get away with saying stupid statements because they've got away with saying stupid statements for so long. They've heard the boss say this stuff. And then all of a sudden it all catches up on everybody. And so you send a message when you don't engage in these practices that it's okay, we can be loose here, no problem. I just had a client in LA, George, that I was just pounding on, you got to do this, you got to do this, you got to do this. And in the sense I audited them, they were growing so fast, they're having so much fun, they're having so many wild parties, they said, I'm not worried about it. Well, they got hit with the first sexual harassment lawsuit, and then 5 followed, okay? So now they find themselves litigating 6 separate sexual harassment lawsuits.
Oh, brother.
You know, there goes that party, right?
I missed that one.
So, and, you know, what happens, how do you ever get in front of a judge and say, we're
committed,
we were trying to take this seriously? Yeah, right. Okay,
yeah, like
show me
that.
some proof of that.
Yeah, right.
So there's the 2 reasons why to audit, okay?
All right.
Now, the next question is, when do we do these audits? And the first place you bring up the conversation is when you're trying to get the BOR. That's why many of the brokers will have a program like ThinkHR, did have a program like HR that works. As George said, we've merged the 2, because they want to be able to talk about something different from the other guy when they're having that conversation. So one of the tools that I encourage people to do, you can do your own, or I'm going to show you one that we've created. It's just so you get an idea of what I'm talking about.
Yeah,
so
okay.
you come into the ThinkHR, we have all these broker tools. You come into the Quick HR Audit tool, and then we brand it like this. And so it's just, when you're in front of a business owner, you're just asking these questions. So for example, when I do my workshops in front of the CEOs, I start off by just a simple audit conversation like this, to get them warmed up, to understand their exposures, to say, hey, maybe my other broker never had a conversation with me like this. and that's the whole goal of a tool like this, to distinguish yourself. In a very noisy marketplace, how do you distinguish yourself? So that's the first time to audit. Our mutual acquaintance, Scott Addis, I've gone to his workshops, his Purple Cow stuff. It's all about using auditing to get your foot in the door. Now, a lot of these brokers will do it on the work comp side, and today I'm just talking about EPL audits. But you do it on the work comp side as well. You do the mod audits and all those types of things to make sure that people classified right. And using auditing to go in is one of the best ways to show your expertise, because you want to establish yourself as an expert. Allowing to create an audit will allow that. Now, look, every one of you who's listening right now, can train yourself in a short period of time to just have a conversation around this document. As we'll talk about in a minute, the real big audit, I don't expect you to be an employment law expert. You talk about the people we work with, that we have on staff, that will assist us in conducting a full audit once we form a client relationship.
My favorite words, client relationship.
Well, you know, that's what you want. Everybody says, you know, here's the funny thing. Everybody says they want to have a relationship with people, but what they mean by that is they want to play golf and then get them at renewal. You know,
that's what relationships stand for.
Where's the relationship in the middle? Where's the love, you know?
That's perfect. I'm going to use that one, too.
So now the second time, now these people are your clients, all right? And it's part of what you're going to view as your risk management services. Total cost of risk is a languaging everybody from Randy Schwartz, Roger Sitkins, and many other people have used for many years. You're not just talking about, you know, you're trying to get on the front end of claims, total cost of risk. And this is when you do the full-on audit. And I would suggest people charge for it. And the way you charge for it is the more mature brokers, what they'll do is they'll do it on a fee-based, you know, ABC fee-based option, depending on the level of services offered. Some brokers will still just, you know, quote their product, and then any services they'll quote separately. I don't believe you give these things away. You can do the quick audit as part of a conversation, but when you get into this is going to involve real time, it's going to involve real benefit, and if it's given to somebody for free, they won't see the value in it. Now, if you just got a $50,000 commission case, then theoretically you're going to use a fee arrangement anyway at that point, and you've amortized these costs into doing the audit. But I'll give you an example. There's two ways to do it. Somebody can go out for many years before all this stuff was online. I would go out to a client. I'd have my checklist. We just sit down and we spend a half a day to a day going through my whole checklist, answering a million questions, and they get a report afterwards. Again, one of the values of the internet is now what you can do is you can have your client come on to the audit. So if you go, you know, the same page here, you go to the audit, and when you get on the audit, then it's a very extensive one, and you saw it, the client will start picking these things off and giving the response. At the end, they get a complete response to it.
Automatically?
And this is a document, then automatically. Then this is a document you then sit down with your client and you go over it. And I say you sit down. It doesn't have to be you. It may be you with your HR person. It may be you with your HR consultant. So what I recommend, the larger brokers, many that I work with, will have an HR person on board. They work both for the agency internally and they work with their clients. They get so busy sometimes and they hire a second one so they can do even more work with their clients. And when they work with their clients, they charge for it. So they can sit down and go over the response and say, here's the tools to use, here's what you do to make sure things are executed upon, because you know how that's important. People can get information but then not execute on it. So your job is to let the CEO know that we're going to go through this whole process, we're going to produce a report, and then we're going to make sure they execute on it as part of our services to you.
Don, what happens if, I'm a mid-sized agency, but all of a sudden I got a $1 million account, or I got $2 million, and what happened? I mean, that guy's just got to go out and get HR help, I think, don't you? Or you tell me. Is
look,
that what?
If you don't have somebody with expertise on staff, you can always form a relationship with an HR consultant, and you only use them when you need to use them in the sense they've already been paid for. So then you can call them up. You're not going to, if you got somebody on staff, theoretically they're busy enough that you're using them all day long, not sit around twiddling their thumbs. But if you don't have a need for a full-time person, then you can certainly contract with somebody. You're not going to have to pay them until you know there's going to be a benefit in using them. I would handle it that way. And some folks, as I'll talk about this a little bit more in a minute, some people will use lawyers in the process as well.
They're really desperate. I'm sorry, Don. I just couldn't resist. I couldn't resist. You left yourself.
It all depends. As you know, just like there's all types of brokers, there's all types of lawyers.
Oh, I know that.
Some brokers just want to make a sale and get the hell out of there. Other brokers really want to be a strategic partner, and they're different animals, okay? And it's the same with lawyers.
Yeah. All right.
So what do we audit? You know, the types of laws, there's going to be 4 basic types of them. You've got the Department of Labor manages the wage and hour things, the Family Medical Leave Act. the ADA, that all comes under the rubric of the Department of Labor. Now, underneath the Department of Labor, there's National Labor Relations Board, the EEOC, and OSHA. So obviously there's the OSHA stuff. For example, just yesterday when I was doing a workshop in Arizona area, they were talking about incentives they have, safety incentives for their drivers and the people in their warehouse. Mm-hmm. And I said, did you realize that OSHA whistleblower provisions do not allow you to have those types of incentives anymore, like lost day incentives or things like that? That's illegal at this point. They had no clue about it. Nobody ever informed them about it. The HR person wasn't sharp enough to know any of this. And so just by happenstance, I heard it, but an audit would have been a proactive way to flush that stuff out. Mm-hmm. The National Labor Relations Board has been insane lately, George. It's obviously none of these people have ever run a business in their life. And you can tell now, you can basically tell your boss he's an asshole because he doesn't pay you enough. The 3 other employees can agree and say, yeah, he's an asshole, he doesn't pay us enough, whether it's true or not. And you can say, I've had enough of this nonsense, fire them. And the NLRB will put them back to work with back pay and make you put this big poster up in your lunchroom saying that you're an idiot and everybody has the right to speak freely about the workplace, okay? Under this administration, they're insane, and a lot of employers don't understand the insanity going on there right now. And then, of course, the EEOC under the Obama administration has been very aggressive, in fact, so aggressive that a lot of the federal courts are smacking them around saying, you can't just subpoena all this stuff for no good reason. They're going on incredible fishing expeditions. They're using the leverage and threatening people that if you don't settle, we're going to take you to court. And, of course, we don't have to worry about legal fees, but you will. And it's just different. It's a really insane environment right now. The pendulum has swung. You know, obviously under the Bush administration it was very pro-employer. Now it's very pro-employee, and the exposure to your clients is greater than it's ever been. Mm-hmm. And a lot of these, at least I don't care what Congress does for the next 2 years, it's the administration that runs all of this, and that's not going away for at least the next 2 years. In fact, they'll probably ratchet it up because they might be concerned they got to do things before we get kicked out of office.
God, here we go again.
Yeah. It never, but that makes work for us. That allows, we can whine all day long about regulation and stuff. Look, if it wasn't for regulation, you wouldn't have to insure anything, right? So right, yeah. You'd be out of a job. This is a welcome nuisance, let's put it that way. Yeah. And when we audit things and we look at what we audit, you're going to be looking at things like documents, like the employee handbook. Is that thing up to date? What type of forms do people use for credit background checks? Are they up to date? You know, what type of claims have you had in the past? Is anything going on right now? What type of procedures do you have to make sure that people get training, to make sure people know where to complain, to make sure you do a proper investigation, to make sure you document all of that? And again, the training is so important. You know, we do a lot of training on ThinkHR. We have a whole section with we're over 600 training titles at this point. Those we haven't created, we've licensed to make sure we have everything. And you know, again, if you've got forklift operators, they ought to be doing training. If you've got managers, they ought to be doing sexual harassment training, that type of thing. Then there's where do they go for support? How do they get help? Do they have a relationship with an employment law firm? Do they already use a consultant? Do they use a third-party program? So do they have a place where they know they can pick up the phone and get answers right away? Because what a lot of people will be is embarrassed to say they don't know, but they won't be embarrassed to pick up a phone, get an answer, and then tell people I know what the answer is now. So that support is very important. And what personnel do they have to manage what? You know, what is, in fact, the HR person doing, whether they have one-time full hat or they're wearing 3 hats? What are the people doing here?
Don't you find that most of those people in HR, in a mid-sized business, you see it with HR, are hires and fires? I mean, hires and basically, instead of all this, their job, they think of HR, I hire people, and that's what I do.
Well, there's a big strategic battle going on in the business literature right now between what we would call administrative HR. You know, this stuff we're talking about right now, the compliance, and a strategic HR, which is about best practices, how to help people truly hire, how to, any of the surveys that I've done of management, they say HR doesn't help us grow the business, they only tell us what we can't do. So that's that challenge of HR being more strategic is, again, there's tools in what we do, but that's got to be something that that individual wants to be or that leader wants them to be, because it's not the general situation. If you look at how most people think about HR, they hate HR. You know, whether they're owners or they're other managers, many employees. HR is the bastard child of corporate life, you know, and yet because of that fact, it has unnecessary exposures and unfulfilled opportunities.
I bet.
You know, if you don't take something seriously, you don't see the opportunity in it. One part of my workshop with the CEOs is showing them the math behind the opportunity in HR, and it's enormous. It's enormous. So another thing you want to do is make sure they have employment practices coverage. Now, the fact is, most companies with more than 5,000 employees, I think it's 100% penetration of EPLI. But when you get under 500, the size companies most of you insure, it's not even a 50-50 proposition. Now, interestingly, the underwriters have been burnt on the big companies because they have big class action claims, and they've lost money on them. And so now they're much more interested in working with the small to mid-sized market. You'll see all the growth efforts there by them. My experience with a lot of the brokers is they don't worry about the EPLI because they don't want to learn about the product. It's not a high commission product in most environments. It might be 1/10 of what somebody gets on benefits or comp, and yet it really rounds out their coverage. And why would only half the companies at this size have EPLI when it's absolutely stupid not to have it? And that's because the broker is not doing their job. My only response to that, if you don't want to learn EPLI, then work with a third-party broker who's an EPLI specialist and just include them in all your proposals. And make sure your clients get that coverage so that the worst they have to suffer for many of what we've just talked about is a 25 grand deductible or something like that.
I didn't realize this. I thought everybody had EPLI coverage.
Oh man, no. And I can't tell you, George, how many times in litigation when I was doing that work, I would see that one-page document where it says, "I told you about EPLI and you didn't want it," and and the owner signs that, which is, it's just the broker being lazy, in my opinion.
Probably.
My opinion. Okay.
No, that's all right. You're right. You see it.
Now, using lawyers, lawyers are expensive people. Lawyers are very smart people, but lawyers want more than anything to do is to bill hours. Okay, they can just suck the blood out of people. That's one reason why you want employment practices coverage, because if something comes up, you'll be able to use these lawyers and not worry about what it's charging you this minute. Lawyer, when you do an audit and you see an exposure, that's when you bring the lawyer in. You don't necessarily need the lawyer to do an audit if you're just following a checklist approach, which has most of all the questions you could ever ask anyway. Even a lawyer can ever ask. Remember, lawyers like me put these audits together. So the lawyers, the funny thing about them, and I've learned this over the years, originally our hotline was staffed by lawyers. And I thought it was a great idea. I said, hey, look, they're better than ThinkHR's HR people. And I learned something over the years. Number one, lawyers don't want to be involved with just stupid questions in their mind. That's a stupid question. They could have Googled the answer to that. And that's 9 out of 10 questions that get asked. So you really don't, what the lawyers want is a question that may be a litigation. I just got sued. Oh, that's my kind of question. I got litigation. Everything else is an annoyance. The other thing is the number one complaint filed against lawyers, at least at the California bar, is a failure to communicate. My ex will tell you the same thing. And
I'll bet.
The problem is when you live these 70-hour work lives and you're in trial and all of that, you don't communicate. So if somebody's got a hotline question, you're calling a lawyer who's in trial for the next 2 weeks, you're not going to get the turnaround you need. So I have drank the Kool-Aid. The team at ThinkHR answers some 250 calls a day. So you use the lawyers on the high-end need where there's an exposure. Okay, we have a potential wage and hour exposure. Now I would like you to help us think through this from a legal perspective.
Good.
And you can use HR consultants. So as I mentioned earlier on, there's two basic models I've seen the brokers do. When the broker itself gets large enough, so Cavanack, one of the agencies here in San Diego,
Yeah, great
by the time Jeff had 25 employees, he brought on an HR person, both to help him make sure he got his act together and also so he can offer some ancillary services value-added to his clients. Well, now they're a much larger agency, and their HR person has been a profit center for years. She spends more of her time with her clients than internally, and because of that, she finally said, look, we've got so much opportunity on clients. She is full-time with her clients, and they've hired somebody else full-time to work half the time with the agency and to support Sandy with her work with the clients. So they've created as a profit center. It's a growth opportunity. It's an added service. It's not a giveaway, and that's a mistake to make. And with the HR consultants, what I have done over the years is you can get them to work with you if you bring a client to them for $50 an hour. Vast majority of them, that's the equivalent of $200,000 a year. Okay, so rather $100,000 a year. So most HR consultants don't make $100,000 a year. Most of them don't know how to market very well. So they're all too happy to just go in the comfort zone of you give them the client, and they'll do a very good job of the work after that. But don't ask them to be good marketers because they're not. So the opportunity to use an HR consultant and say, look, I think I can probably guarantee you at least 5 hours a week, or I can guarantee you at least 10 hours a week with my clients, and this is what we're going to get you trained on working with my clients, is how I want you to approach them. It's a real opportunity for both you and that HR consultant. And if they get so busy that they're a really full-time situation, you either bring them on board and get them out of the consultancy, or you hire somebody to replace them. And that's what I see makes sense.
Me too. Good point.
Okay.
I'm learning.
So almost finished here.
Well, that's all right. I'm learning. I'm learning.
The last thing is, all of the value-added programs in the HR arena, there's two types of them, all right? There's the types that manage technology. So they're known as human resources and information systems. Some brokers will use a portion of that manages online benefits. But HRIS systems can tie in from payroll and go all the way to COBRA administration and about 8 to 10 different modules in between. So they manage the data. On the other side of the conversation are the programs that manage the compliance and the strategy. That's what we do. We're not on the data side. So the live is to pick up the phone support. 1/3 of our calls come in from the brokers, not necessarily from their clients, and a lot of those are around the ACA, no surprise there. Then all the training solutions, both the agency has the option of managing the training for their clients, or the client manages it themselves, and then the online resources. So most of the, both federal and state related, all the personnel forms, the handbook, thing like that, there's many companies that have these. I just believe that we do the best job of it, but the best program of all is a program that somebody actually uses.
Well, amen.
You know?
This is fascinating. It's all fascinating to me because it's not something, when you grow up in the agency business. I mean, I working for agencies all these years. It's just, until you came along, Don, it wasn't really all that prevalent, I think, in the whole doggone industry. I think you opened a lot of eyes.
No, we're one of the first people doing it, and you latched on, and Press Diamond, and those guys latched on to what I was doing.
Right.
Now there's other players in the field. The technology, the cost of creating technology has gotten cheaper, which has allowed other people to enter into the field. I think HR has been at it as long as I have. I was a thorn in their side for many years in the P&C area, so they finally said, why don't we just acquire them? And it's been I really enjoy what's happened with us.
Oh, that's great. I'm glad for you.
So let me wrap it up with this, and I'll take any more questions you want, George.
No, I don't have any more questions.
If you contact me here, I'll give you a copy of that short audit I showed you earlier on. I'll email you a copy of that audit. If you want to know about the program, you can call me up, and we'll obviously take you on a demo. That's the business we're in, so I'm open to that anytime. But if you even just have questions about how you can approach this in your sales process or your post-sales process where you're expanding the services you offer, as George knows, don't hesitate to give me a buzz.
Well, I don't have any more questions because we could talk this thing for a week, and I have heard you speak for hours, and I'm sitting there entranced. I love the fact that you're giving them that short audit. That's a great step for starters. But, Donna, I think it's really nice that you do respond to these people. You're not going to charge them for their conversation, and I just want to congratulate you. And again, and thank you for what you've
You
done
just
for our industry.
you just remind people they get what they pay for.
Okay, well, listen.
No, but seriously, and any help anybody wants.
Oh, I know you are. That's just where you are, and I love that. Well, okay, and for the rest of you can go back to the email and see the usual archives and all that, and the quiz flash and all that. But I do suggest that you take this Monday morning and get it in the hands of as many of your management people as you possibly can. This Monday morning, simple as it is, and let them go to Don, because you'll find he's the best, at least my opinion. So Don, thank you again, my friend.
All right, George, keep doing what you're doing, buddy.
Okay, boy.
Take care.